Welcome to Bottles and Bites Without Borders, where every sip and every bite tell a story. Rob is your host. Each week, he will take you on a delicious journey, from vineyard tales and distillery secrets to culinary traditions. So, grab a favorite drink, a plate of something tasty, and join us for another adventure with Bottles and Bites.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Appreciate you guys stopping back in. Looking forward to talking to everybody and discussing my journey in coffee. And hopefully it gives you some information on the world of specialty coffee and making delicious coffee at home. I think there can be this, if you don't know, it may expose you to what it is to make, I'll just say it, world-class coffee at home versus, bulk coffee that you buy from the grocery store. So it may kind of inspire you there a little bit, may educate you a little bit on what this process is. I hope it does that as well. But I thought it'd be fun to talk about my coffee journey. I've been deep into the rabbit hole of coffee, specialty coffee, brewing at home for probably the last 4.5 years when I got into it. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how that evolution has progressed, how it's continuing to progress, where I'm at now. We'll talk about my humble beginnings in coffee, going from Folgers and a drip machine to the many different brewers, that I have now. We'll talk about, kind of what hooked me and got me into the rabbit hole of coffee. My coffee bar at home. I'll run down for you guys what I currently have in my setup, what I'm using for brewers, what I'm using for grinders, things like that. And then we'll get in a little bit to the science of coffee, why science. And I always say coffee, if you're a baker at all, getting into coffee will be easy for you because they're very similar. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then we're going to close out the show with some reflections on my journey, maybe some recommendations for, beans or recipes, things like that. We'll close out the show, but it's going to be a fun conversation. So let's dive right into it. So as you heard me say, I started, with coffee, and coffee wasn't thought of as when I started in coffee. It was more drinking for effect, right? You hear us say that sometimes when our journey begins in alcohol, we're drinking for effect more than we are the appreciation of what's in our glass or, what's in our can if it was beer. I think coffee is very similar to that. We're drinking for the effect of that caffeine, right? We're drinking for a little pick-me-up, a little get you going in the morning. And me, like so many of us, started with Folgers. Now, not just any Folgers. I drank the good stuff. I had a big canister in my fridge that was Colombian Folgers. And so I thought I had some good coffee in my fridge. And I had, not a Mr. Coffee machine. I had a Krups, which to me was, again, at the time, 20 years ago, Krups, I thought, kicked the crap out of Mr. Coffee machines. Therefore, I was already getting a great cup of coffee. And boy, was I wrong. But I didn't know it, right? We don't know what we don't know. And back then, I wasn't thinking about getting a good cup of coffee. I wanted it to taste good, right? Anything we eat or drink, we want to taste good. And so I definitely wanted that. But for me, it was more about, getting something that would help get my day started. There was some kind of comfort to it. There was this satisfaction still, even though it wasn't great coffee that I had in my cup, and I didn't know it at the time, but there was still this comfort on you might grab a cup and take it with you for work, but on a weekend, on a day that you might be off and it's nice weather and you sit out back on a fall day and have a nice cup of coffee or something like that, there was still this, coffee still kind of took you to this space, this place that you felt relaxed and comfortable, and it was nice. And it was convenient, the convenience of making coffee. And when I made coffee back then, it was in scoops. And some of you might be going, well, that's what I do now. I use scoops. So what are you talking about? We're going to get into that. So what was the moment that got me to, kind of flip the switch and go, wait a second, I'm not doing coffee right. I think I can do it better. And I think there can be a much better product, much better result in my cup. I can be drinking better coffee. And for me, that wasn't any kind of aha moment. It wasn't any kind of, I happened to see a video or anything. And at that time, I Starbucks was really all I knew, unless I was in an airport. Maybe Pete's was still around a little bit then, as far as specialty coffee shops. And, what I got at a Starbucks was what most people probably still get. It's a sugar-loaded, milk-loaded kind of latte, creamy, chocolatey, whatever kind of drink. If I went to a Starbucks back in the day, that's what I would get. I can remember a couple of times I tried a black coffee from them, and just awful. I remember just going, I can't drink coffee without something sweet in it, without some additional flavor, something that's going to make me, not make this ugly face when I take a sip of the coffee. And so I just assumed I don't like coffee on its own. If I'm going to drink coffee, I've got to have, some cream or sugar or something to make it taste better for my palate. Well, I had a friend of mine who had reached out to me, and this is a friend that with me enjoys, or like me, I should say, enjoys, exploring the world of food, big into wine, big into whiskeys and cocktails and all these things that me and my wife are in. And he knew that I drank coffee, but he knew also that I didn't drink good coffee. And so my friend one time texted me and reached out and said, hey, is there a reason you haven't explored the world of coffee yet? And I said, no. I mean, I didn't know there was much to explore. I thought I kind of had it covered. And he's like, no, you're missing the boat and you're missing it big time. And I said, really? He said, yeah, I think I can show you, kind of give you a glimpse into this world and let you see what coffee can be. And I said, okay, let's do it. So we ended up doing a podcast episode of me kind of getting exposed to the world of coffee. And that was my friend Tyler Martin. And if you want to, it's a great episode to listen to. It's one of our most popular episodes, believe it or not. Go back and find it. It's in our library. It's episode number 58. And it's, I think we titled it something like How to Make a Great Cup of Coffee at Home. So yeah, check it out. I think you'll be Tyler does a great job of giving you step-by-step kind of how to set up, how to make, all the technical things. We're not going to get into all that. That episode's there for you. Today, we're just going to, continue with my journey in coffee. So Tyler was the one who, kind of set me up with that. He came out, we did, if you've done wine tastings, they call it a blind. Whiskey tastings a blind. In the coffee world, we did what they call a cupping, where they brew 3 or 4 or 5 coffees, and you'll take sips of each of these coffees, and it's like a blind tasting, and you'll, analyze and talk about and have thoughts on and get tasting notes and describe the coffee. Do you like it? Do you not like it? And that's what Tyler did for me. We had a cupping that really, opened up for me this world of coffee and what it could be. And I was like, holy cow. And the main reason I was saying holy cow was, in my mind, I had always thought of coffee in this very dark, I'd say like overcooked kind of bitter profile when I tried it black. And consistently, no matter where I got coffee from, and what I mean by that is always from the grocery store, but from Dunkin' Donuts bag at the grocery store, or Starbucks bag at the grocery store, or Pete's, or whatever, the label on the bag made me think it could be good. I bought that bag, and whatever I got, it was always a very, very similar profile. Well, the coffees that Tyler brought and did with me with this cupping, where 180 degrees of what I'd been drinking for however many years I'd been drinking coffee. And I remember going, hold on a second. Why am I getting, fruit on this, blueberry on this? Why does this taste like this? Why is it light? Why does it have this acidity on the palate? These are descriptors and things I've never thought about with coffee. And so Tyler got me hooked. And, anybody who knows me will tell you that if I get interested in something, I hit that rabbit hole and I go pretty hard. I want to learn about it. I want to start exploring. I want to start trying. And that's exactly what happened when Tyler Martin gave me this cupping of coffees and what a really good cup of coffee done right can be. So getting down the rabbit hole, kind of what was that process? What did you need to do? Well, you have to have the right equipment. And I don't want to overwhelm people or make them think this is holy cow, what am I getting into? Do I really, don't push, don't click off, keep listening. I think if you're interested at all in getting into coffee, it's not going to be as overwhelming as you might think it's going to be. It's really not. And I'll also say this. You heard me say at the beginning, there's science involved in coffee, and it's necessary to really get that great glass of coffee in your cup. But if you're a baker at all, if you've done any baking, if you're a pizza maker at all, if you've done any kind of baking, science is so important, meaning you have to measure, you have to weigh. You cannot just do cups and half cups and whatever. It's not going to be accurate and can mess up your recipe. So if you've done any kind of baking, you get that. The same exact thing applies with coffee. You have to weigh, you have to measure, and it has to be in grams, not in, teaspoons or scoops or anything like that. It has to be precise, and that's how you get this great cup of coffee. So when Tyler came to my house, he brought his own kettle, he brought his own scale, he brought his own brewer to make these coffees. He brought everything because, of course, I didn't have it. All I had was this Krups machine and a canister of Folgers Colombian. Don't forget, it was good coffee. I'm kidding. Colombian in the refrigerator. And so I'm looking at him do this, and I'm going, man, this is it was a little intimidating for me to see this guy doing all these things, grinding these freshly roasted beans. By the way, smell fantastic. And doing these steps that you need to do to get, the proper extraction of coffee flavors from the grounds with this water and put it into our cups. So let's talk just for a second about what is the gear that you have to have. And come on, Rob, what's this going to cost me? What am I reaching into my pocket for? How many Benjamins I got to pull out, to get this coffee bar set up so I can start making these great cups of coffee at home? Well, it's probably not as much as you think it is. And I'll say this as well. If you're the person that is, drinking Folgers at home and not going by the coffee shop, you're going to get a return on investment just with the quality of coffee you're going to have in your glass going forward. You'll have no regrets in making that investment in the coffee. If you're somebody who doesn't do coffee at home, but might be interested in you're listening to this, I would say, and that you stop by a specialty coffee shop each day to get your coffee, or maybe it's a coffee shop that's in the building you work in, and you're paying, $5 to $8 for that coffee that you get every day. Your return on investment is probably 2 weeks when you think about the price you're paying for coffee. So let's go through the things that you're going to need, the pieces of equipment you're going to need to be able to make coffee at home, and kind of what that budget is going to be. And I'm going to give you an entry-level budget. This is kind of the floor. If you can afford more, you can always spend more. Like anything, you can always spend more. But this would be the floor for where you could be to get great, fantastic coffee at home. $150. That's all you're going into this. That's your risk, is $150. Now, the other thing you have to be willing to do is make a little bit of time. right? Because you have to make coffee every morning, specifically to the folks I was referring to who are stopping and getting a coffee each morning. But as I say that, I'm also going, wait a second. If on the way to work, you're stopping at a specialty coffee shop to buy a coffee, you're spending X amount of minutes to do that. That's probably taking more time, or even if it's in your building, going down to get it and coming back up is taking more time than it would take, 4 minutes at home to grind or let's just call it 10 minutes at home to, get everything ready, grind, pour, and get your cup of coffee ready to go out the door. So now we know cost. There is a cost, but the risk isn't great. The return on investment is, I would say, almost guaranteed. There's time that you're going to need to do this. You're going to have to take some time. But again, we've already said and identified that it's not adding any more time to your day, because if you're drinking coffee somewhere, you're making up that time. If you're doing a at home coffee with Folgers and some kind of drip machine of Mr. Coffee or something, the improvement in coffee is a big return on the time that you're going to invest to do it. And you're going to see that really quick. So those things are out of the way. Let's talk about the equipment. We're on a $150 budget. You're going to need 4 pieces of equipment to start making great coffee at home. The first piece is the most important piece, which is your grinder. You're going to need a really good grinder. You're going to want it to have good burrs. And this might be a foreign word to you right now. You're like, what the hell are burrs? Burrs are these metal, not plastic, because you can find cheap ones. That's why I say you guys invest a little money in this. These are these metal teeth-like pieces that spin together as you crank a hand crank or a machine that spins. When the coffee bean goes in between them, it's what grinds them up. So you have burrs. These are called coffee burrs. You have 2 types that are acceptable, that are really good at making ground coffee in our world of specialty coffee. One would be conical burrs in the shape of that conical, and then the other would be flat burrs. Either one of them would be acceptable. Most hand grinders, I think all, but there might be an exception to that, but almost all hand grinders are going to be conical burrs that you're going to get. So if you get a machine, sometimes you can get a conical, sometimes you can get a flat burr. So like I'm telling you, there's a lot to throw at you, but as you dive into it, like anything else, it becomes more kind of normal to you and easier to understand. So the grinder is going to be the most important piece of equipment that you have, because with a really good grinder, and okay beans, I can make better coffee than really good beans in a bad grinder. So beans are important, but grinder, how you handle those beans, how they're dealt with, how they're worked to get them into a condition, to be ready to be made into coffee, is the most important thing. It really is. So grinder, of our $150 budget, we're going to allot between $70 and $90 for our grinder. And that's probably going to be a hand grinder, which is fine. I mean, there's actually some, hand grinding can be very relaxing. It can be kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of soothing, making you feel good, putting you in a good spot. Hand grinding, when you pour these fresh beans out of a bag and you get that aroma, and then you start to grind them and you get more aroma. I mean, it's really relaxing, satisfying, it's really nice. So hand grinding is not a bad thing to do when you talk about a travel setup and taking coffee with you on the road, because believe me, you will get there. You're going to get to a point where you want to have coffee with you when you travel, because it's going to be important. Like anything, when you get used to the standard becomes a great cup of coffee every morning. Travel coffee is a way to make sure you get that. So a hand grinder, having at least one, is really good. So I think starting with that and eventually getting to a machine is the way to go. Okay, so we got $70 to $90 out of our budget there. I'm going to say, you could do anything. There's some Onesie Pressos, Onesie Presso's a great manufacturer for hand grinders. Timemore, the Timemore C3, I think is about $70. If I'm going to give a recommendation for the onesie presso. I would say the Q2. I think I got mine for $85, $89, something like that. Really good grinder as well. So there's some options out there. Look at Amazon. I'll put some things, some recommendations in the description of this podcast for you as well. Now, the second piece of equipment is going to be your scale. And like I said, if you're a baker at all already, if you're doing some measuring in grams because you do some kind of baking that you need to, you have a kitchen scale, probably, more than likely, and you're good to go. You do want it to be in tenths. So you want it to have, 2.2 grams, 2.3, and so on up to 3 or whatever. So you do want it to be in tenths. If you don't, and you need to buy because you're like, listen, I don't bake, I drink coffee, I drink crap coffee, I want to drink good coffee, I'm ready to make the jump, then you need to buy a scale. And on Amazon, you can get a really good scale that's going to be quality for probably $15 to $25. So of our budget now, we're nearing $100. Let's just say we're between $90 and $100, and we've got half of the equipment we need. There's 2 more things that we still need, one of which is a brewer. And a brewer is the least expensive of what we're going to suggest that you get. And what I'm going to suggest is the Hario V60. And you can get that right off Amazon. They have a couple different versions. They have a ceramic, they have a stainless steel, and they have a plastic. Plastic being the least expensive, and plastic actually being my favorite for brewing coffee. The plastic holds the temp consistently better, doesn't take as long to warm up as the stainless steel and the ceramic. So not only are you getting the least expensive version of the V60, the plastic, but it's the best priced. It's only going to cost you probably between $8 and $11. I mean, I think I've seen it as low as around $8 when it's on sale, and usually around $10, $11. So not very expensive. So 3 pieces of equipment in, we're right at our $100 budget, or $100 of our $150 budget. And the last thing that you need is something to make hot water. And you may already have this. And again, if you already have a scale, your budget has shifted a little bit, right? You've got some other dollars that maybe you can spend somewhere else, or you don't have to spend as much to get into coffee. But you need something to make hot water and something that would allow you to pour it over. And I'm speaking of a kettle. Kettles are the best thing. It's not the only thing you can use. You could put a big glass of water in the microwave, get it really hot, and pour it over. But it's not the best way. So if we're going to set up a coffee bar and kind of get it going for us, getting a kettle would be the best way to do it. And if I were going to make a recommendation, there would be a few that I think are good options that aren't going to break the bank. So on Amazon, you can find the Bodum 27-ounce Bistro Gooseneck. And the first thing I'm going to do, you heard me say Gooseneck, that's going to be my preference for coffee. If you already have a kettle and it's not a Gooseneck and you want to use it to start, you're perfectly fine doing that. I think as you get into this, you're going to want a Gooseneck. And I'm going to let you know that they're not super expensive. So you can get a Gooseneck. That one is $39 for the 27-ounce Bodum. You can get the Instinct Gooseneck electric kettle for $59. You can get, I have this one, the Corsia, which is $69. But I will tell you this Corsori, I guess is how you say it, not Corsia, Corsori, does go on sale frequently. So it's regular price right now, $69.99. But I will tell you, I've seen this down in that $45 to $49 range frequently. So look for a sale, I would say, as well. There are some higher end ones that you can get. So I started with the Corsori kettle, was my first one for the first couple of years. And then I upgraded to the Stag EKG Pro, which is, runs right at about $170 for that kettle. But that's something that I think, you may want to do down the road. And you may be going, well, Rob, if you had a gooseneck kettle, why would you Why would you buy another one for, twice or almost three times as much as what you paid for the Kasori? Well, I'll get into that in just a little bit, but there's a reason for it. But the Kasori for an entry level is really, really good. And by the way, my Kasori now goes to my office, and so I have coffee at the office when I need it there. Something you need to kind of think about, you don't need to think about it, but I think it will happen naturally, is that you're going to, if you work at you don't work from home, you work in an office, there's going to be a want maybe to, get you a little coffee set up at home. And that's what I've done. So as I upgraded things, what I had initially to start became my office setup for coffee. So I think there's a lot of people who do it that way. And quite honestly, it's a good way to do it. Now let's run through real quick what I have on my coffee bar right now, where I'm at in my journey. Then we're going to get into some of the science of actually brewing. What does it take to brew a cup of coffee? We've given you what you need at home. You need that grinder, you need a scale, you need a brewer, and you need a kettle. And then, of course, you need beans. And we're going to get into that in a minute. Beans being very, very important, obviously. But you can't do anything with beans if you don't have the proper equipment to handle and manipulate those beans to get the great cup of coffee. All right, on my coffee bar at home, what I currently have is I do have an espresso machine, and we may come back and do another episode on that. It's a type of coffee espresso, and I have the Rancilio Silvia version 5. It's an Italian espresso machine. It's not big and fancy, but it's a workhorse, and it does an outstanding job. Now, in my house, I'm the only one who drinks coffee. My kids are gone, moved out of the house. It's just me and my wife, and she's not a coffee drinker. So the Rancilio is the first espresso machine I bought. It, like I said, it's a workhorse. I know of people who have had this for earlier versions of it, but have had it for 20 plus years and is still going strong. So works for me. I don't need a double boiler. Anyway, getting a little bit off topic. That's espresso, maybe another episode. So I have my espresso machine. So I have two grinders on my coffee bar. I have one specifically for espresso and one for pour over. My espresso grinder that I use with my Rancilio Silvia, the espresso machine, is my DF64 grinder. Now, this is a great grinder. They tell you that it can do pour over grinds, but it really doesn't do it well. It excels at espresso grinding. The 64 just represents that these are 64 millimeter flat burrs that are in this machine. And so that's my espresso grinder. I also have a pour over grinder. It's kind of the opposite of the DF64. This is the Fellow Ode 2, the second generation. So anybody who's heard of Fellow Ode, the first one, the burrs weren't thought to be very good. They really did a great upgrade on these. And the Gen 2 burrs, they're really good. They're very comparable to the SSP burrs. So again, I'm throwing maybe a lot at first time coffee people listening to this, trying to get into coffee, but you will get there. You will understand all this in the future and go, now I know what he was talking about. But anyway, Fellow Ode Gen 2 is my pour over grinder. And like I said, it's the 180 degrees of the DF64 where it does pour over grinds beautifully. Best in the game, in my opinion. But it says it can do espresso, but nobody in the coffee world thinks it can do espresso. It really doesn't. So I have two grinders for that reason. One specializing for my pour over, one for my espresso. Then we get into brewers when we start talking about, the Fellow Ode 2. This is where I do most of my coffee. And I'll tell you, typically my coffee routine is I'm doing a pour over during the week. Usually, as I'm leaving the house, I'm taking a coffee with me. And then on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays is when I fire up the espresso machine, and I'm going to do either a shot of espresso or a milk coffee on the weekends. Never do a latte, but I'll do typically a flat white is my milk coffee of choice. And then there are times in the afternoon, if I come home and I just need a little pick me up, I'll pull a quick shot of espresso there as well. But for the most part, during the week, I'm doing my pour over coffee. So my brewers that I really like, and again, if your first time listening to this, I'm throwing a lot at you, or first time listening to this, first time hearing about coffee brewers and things like that, I'm throwing a lot at you. The Hario V60 the Origami and the Kalita Wave are my workhorses during the week. These are my three favorite brewers during the week. I usually play with my grind size, play with my different coffees I have, and play with these three different brewers to have my coffee each week or each day. I do have some other brewers. The AeroPress, I have the AeroPress Go and I have the AeroPress XL. And these are immersion brewers, not pour over, not drip. They're immersion. And they're great for travel. And we may do a whole YouTube video on that in the future. I have the Clever, which is also an immersion brewer. Have the Chemex. And if you've heard the term Chemex brewer before, it's a classic brewer that has been around for a very long time, since the 40s, and it does a fantastic job. Just a very clean cup of coffee with the filter that it uses. You know, it really takes out a lot of the oils and things out of the coffee. Very clean, bright cup of coffee. And then the French press, which is a very classic brewer as well. The Chemex, back to that, if you've ever watched Friends, when you get an idea of what this is, the Chemex brewer, what it looks like, if you watch Friends, you'll see on their bar, they have in most of their episodes, when you see the kitchen, the Chemex brewers right there on their bar. Like I said, it's been around since the 1940s. So I have these brewers in addition to some kind of small craft brewers that have been, you know, when I go to a specialty coffee shop and they've got one, I'll pick it up, give it a shot, see what I think. I still come back to the V60, the Origami, and the Kalita Wave during the week. When I travel, when I'm on the road, whether it be for pleasure or for work, the AeroPress is my go-to coffee brewer. It does a fantastic job. The AeroPress in general makes beautiful coffee. It's not a lesser coffee than the three that I'm mentioning, the V60, Origami, or the Kalita Wave. It's not. It does as good a job. Some might say it does a better job. I just prefer the pour over versus the immersion brewing. There are friends that I have that use the AeroPress at home, at the office, and when they travel all the time, that's their brewer of choice. So it is that good. And you know, I would say it's up to you to make up your decision. If you're going to buy one brewer and you have this thought that you might want to travel as well, or you do travel for work and you want to get into coffee, the AeroPress might be your entry, your first brewer to get, because it would check all those boxes. You know, it can take it to work if you need to brew a cup there. You need at home, you can use it there. Traveling, you can take it with you there. It's just so much easier. Doesn't require a gooseneck kettle, just hot water. Usually when I'm traveling and I'm using the AeroPress, I'll use, you know, usually they have like a, what is it? The Keurig in the hotel room. And I'll just put the cup with no pot in there, get my hot water, and then pour it into my AeroPress and let it steep for a little while. And that's how I make my coffee. You don't have to have when you do immersion brewing, you don't have to have a kettle of any kind. You just got to have some way to make hot water and then pour that hot water into the AeroPress or the Clever or the French press. So immersion brewing that's the big difference. Immersion is you're taking all those coffee grounds and you're letting them steep. You're just pouring water over them. They're not coming out until you do what you need to release the water from the coffee grounds. So it just sits in there for a while on that coffee. Where pour over with the V60 Origami and the Kalita Wave, now as I pour over the top of those coffee grounds, it drips down through and releases into the vessel. So that's the difference between immersion brewing and pour over brewing. And then after that, you know, I do have some fun coffee carafes on the bar. I have a lot of different glassware, these double-walled glasses in different sizes that I really enjoy. Obviously, I have two scales. Both are the Fellow scales. One is the bigger one. One is a small that I use for my espresso, but it's also my travel scale when I travel. So that rounds out my coffee bar. Oh, I guess the most important thing is, you know, in the cabinet of my coffee bar, I do have usually anywhere between 4 and 7 bags of coffee that I'm drinking through and enjoying. So, and that kind of gets us into the next part of our podcast today, which is the brewing, the actual taking this equipment and using it and applying the science that we talked about and talking a little bit more about what that science is, how it actually works. So as we get into this, let's start first with the coffee bean, because you heard me mention those 4 pieces of equipment, but you also heard me talk about how important the coffee bean is, because having really good quality coffee is most important to getting good coffee in your cup. But if you don't have good equipment to handle that good coffee, doesn't matter. You're going to lose regardless. But now that we have good equipment, getting good coffee matters. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is never buy it at a grocery store, number 1. Never buy it pre-ground, number 2, because you're taking away any opportunity you have to play with that coffee for grind size and for different brewers that might want a different grind size depending on the brew method that you're using. Sounds a little confusing. It's really not. We're going to get into it in just a second. But let's continue to talk about the coffee bean. When you go, so you're going, okay, well, where do I buy coffee? Well, we all know there's specialty coffee shops. You're going to avoid the big commercial ones. You're looking for mom and pop types of shops in your area. Sometimes there are shops that are just roasters. All they do is roast and sell beans. They don't have a coffee shop. Those are great as well. Sometimes they don't have a storefront and they do most of their sales or all of their sales. Well, let me say it this way. They do most of their sales online, that they have a website, you order, they roast, they bag, and then they send them to you. But a lot of them that don't have a storefront will also work with a specialty coffee shop in the area and have their bags, at that coffee shop. They'll roast the coffee and provide it to that coffee shop to sell. So those are your options, but you definitely want to get a local specialty coffee, locally roasted coffee bean. That's where you want to get your beans from. So there's a few things you need to know when you're looking at coffee. So you go, okay, I'm going to run down to my specialty coffee shop and I'm going to buy a couple bags of beans so I can, kind of get started with this after I've bought my equipment. And you're like, okay, I go in and it can be a little overwhelming. It can be a little confusing. So let's go through some very important, almost critical pieces of information that you need to find on the bag to help you make a good decision on, buying that bag of coffee or not. And I'm going to start with the most important thing. The most important thing is going to be the roast date, because freshly roasted coffee is what you want. Freshly meaning within the last 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. And it could be as recently as a couple days, but no later than, the day you're buying them. It shouldn't have been roasted any longer than, let's just call it 3 weeks ago. Then you can buy, anything in that window, you're good to buy that coffee. But roast date, so important. And by the way, the things that I'm telling you now, you're going to go to the grocery store. Well, next time you're in the grocery store, I want you to look in the coffee aisle where you might have been buying coffee. 1, tell me how hard it is to find whole beans. This is pretty hard. There might be a little bit, but there's not a lot there. And 2, all the things I'm mentioning that you want to find on a bag, you're probably not going to find on any of those bags other than maybe where it comes from the country, but that's going to be it. So back to what you're looking for on that bag of coffee. So roast date, most important thing, you want it to be no longer than 3 weeks ago that it was roasted for you to purchase that coffee. And somebody might go, well, you can go longer than that. You can, but I would just say, stay within that 3 week window and you're always safe, depending on how much coffee you have in your bar, how soon, how much you use at a time, things like that. But anyway, after that, the other things are important, but, roast date being the most important. The other things are important. You want to know where that coffee comes from, what country. If you can find out what region that coffee is from within that country, always helps. And then you want to know how the beans were processed, because this is going to help you figure out your palate. Just like in wine and whiskey, how something is made, you can go, do I like it made this way or do I like it made that way? And you might like it both ways, but at least having an understanding of what that process is and what to expect from it being made that way will help you in understanding and having an expectation of what you're going to get when you buy that bag of coffee. So the two processes for coffee beans, and let me just say this. Well, no, I'm going to get to it in a second. Two processes for coffee beans. One is washed and one is natural. And let's talk about natural first. So first of all, if you don't know this, I'll let you know right now, a coffee bean is not a coffee bean. A coffee bean is the seed of a cherry, so it's part of a fruit. So when these get harvested, when they get picked, and these seeds are taken out of this fruit, there's pulp around it, right? And so the natural process would be they would have this canvas down on the ground. They would put all of these beans on that canvas, and they would let the heat and the sun kind of cook and naturally, cook off that pulp from that flesh from the coffee bean, the cherry seed. That's one process. The washed process kind of makes sense, right? You're going to go, okay, they wash them. That's exactly right. They're going to the coffee farmer is going to take their beans after they pull them out, these cherry seeds out. They got pulp on them. They've got some flesh on them. They take them to this washing station, and they wash the beans for them to remove all of that. So that's your two processes for how beans are prepared to get to that kind of green state where they're ready to be roasted. Now, I do need to tell you, because, I'm thinking about this as I'm talking about this, and I said two processes. There's also two coffee beans, two distinct coffee beans that are used to make coffee. The first one I'm going to talk about is Arabica, which is the most common specialty coffee bean. This is a high-end coffee bean. It can be susceptible to, mildew and disease and things, but it also produces the best coffee that you can get. So most of your specialty coffee shops, most of your high-quality coffee that you're going to buy in a bag is going to be Arabica. The other coffee bean that can be made is Robusto, which is going to be kind of your bulk coffee, your cheap coffee. If you think about wine, let's just use the analogy of Robusto is going to be like Gallo, and Arabica is going to be Arabica is going to be one of your first growths in Bordeaux, something like that. That to show kind of how different they are for quality. Can you get some good Robusta? Probably, maybe, but is it likely? Are you going to miss more than you hit if you buy that? Way more. And with the opposite would be true with Arabica. You're going to get really good quality almost all the time. So those are your two beans that you're going to have. All right, now let's get into the actual science of it. Now that we know what we're looking for when we buy beans, kind of what the beans are. Let me say I didn't finish. So that's your two beans. Let's go back to the coffee bag when you're buying that. So we've got where the country is that the beans are from, a subregion if that's on there, the process, natural or washed, the roast date, we need to know that. And then we want to know the roast level. What's the roast level of my beans? Is it a light roast, a light medium, a medium plus, a dark roast? That's going to help me kind of set some expectation as well. And then we're going to want to know any tasting notes, any descriptors that the specialty coffee shop would say, typically this is what you would get as far as the profile of this coffee when you make a cup. So it sounds like a lot of information, but it's really not. Once you get into coffee, second nature. First thing I do when I go into a coffee shop, because when I travel, it makes it a lot of fun to try to find specialty coffee shops, buy coffees from all over, and, bring them home and enjoy them. But the first thing I do when I pick up a bag is what's the roast date? What's the roast level? And then, those then will help me make a decision on what I want to buy. All right, so now we're going to get into the science of it. We know the coffee bean. We know how to buy beans. We've got all our equipment, as far as what we need to make a great cup of coffee. Now the science of it. So grind size matters. And there's some typicals. There's some standards. And when you buy a grinder, you're going to get some information that'll tell you for this style of coffee or this brewer, grind size is going to be between here and here. So they're going to give you some kind of information to get you started. But in the coffee world, we call it dialing in your coffee, whether it's espresso or pour over, you dial it in to this grind size, this water temp, the volumes that you're using. So you're going to have to play with that a little bit because it's very subjective, right? There's not an absolute. It's your taste buds are your taste buds. So what you really like, I might not. We all know how that works in food or wine or whiskey or anything else. So it's same in coffee. So grind size, what size am I grinding? And that gets back to why I said you need to buy whole beans because this allows you to, pull out 15 grams, grind it and go, ooh, I'm going to go 2 notches down, make it a little smaller because that was a little bitter to me and I want it to be a little sweeter. And so you change that grind size and then that's dialing in and you play with that grind size until you hit a spot. And then you go, boom, for that bag, that's where I'm at on that bag of coffee. That's where I'm going to always grind it. Water temperature matters. Okay. Coffee to water, the amount of coffee I have, 20 grams of coffee, to the ratio of water. And you're going, okay, well, what is that? Well, let's just go over real quick. There's 3 kind of ratios that everyone uses. Now, you can get outside this. This is guidelines. It's not a hard rule. But the 3 ratios are this: 1 to 15, 1 to 16, or 1 to 17. So 1 gram of coffee, 15 grams of water. 1 gram of coffee, 16 grams of water. 1 gram of coffee, 17 grams of water. So that's your 3 ratios. So let's just, for simple math, if I have 20 grams, let's just make it even more simple. If I have 10 grams of coffee, I know I'm going to, 1 to 15, I'm going to have 150 grams of water, or I'm going to have 160, or I'm going to have 170. So you can see the 1 to 15 ratios, going to be a little bit more intense, a little stronger ratio if you like your coffee a little stronger. If you like a more finesse, a more kind of elegant, kind of softer style of coffee, some people go a little bit more to 18 and can get more of this tea style of coffee. You can do that as well. So you can see that the more water you put in, it's just going to dilute a little bit more and soften some of those things. Now, there's also beans that require a different ratio. There's some beans that I know when I buy these, I brew those at 1 to 16. And when I buy this one, I do it at 1 to 15 or whatever. So that's where we get back into this, the rabbit hole, the exploration, the, just continuing to try things to find what you can do with the different profiles, flavor profiles of a coffee. So that's our coffee to water ratio. You heard me say water temperature. Typically, you're going to be in Fahrenheit anywhere between 190 degrees all the way up to boiling at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, most people are going to be around 200 to 205 for most coffees, but there are some people who like to go to boiling for some coffees. There's some coffees that you go, I'm going to be more in that 190, 195 range. So again, this is the fun of coffee, man. Go explore, go try, see what you like. And then brew time. How long do you want this to brew? Method and recipe. So there's a lot that goes in. So when you're ready to start making your coffee, you're going to grind it to a certain size. You're going to make a determination of, I'm going to use this much coffee to this much water, 1 to 16. I'm going to have my water temperature at this. And then when I put it on the coffee, I'm going to use this much brew time. So I will tell you, when you're doing a pour over, you're going to put that first pour over your coffee. And usually it's a 3-to-1 for that first pour. So if I have 10 grams of coffee, I'm going to pour 30 grams of water to get started. And you're going to see this coffee kind of grow like a mushroom. And that's what we call the bloom. It's blooming. It's starting to open up. And as you put that second pour in after 30 seconds to a minute, you're going to see it turn to this caramel kind of brown, this kind of beige color, and then you're going to start smelling, and it's releasing the CO2, those beans that have been cooked, and that CO2 has been locked in. Now we're releasing it. So that's your second pour. And then you continue, you're going to find recipes and methods on how to pour, but you're always, in my opinion, going to want to do a bloom to open up the coffee and get it ready to receive more water so that we can extract that flavor from that coffee. And I will tell you, this is the podcast coming out this week. If you follow the YouTube channel, same name, Bottles and Bites Without Borders, in the next couple of weeks, we have a video coming out, kind of talking about this again, going over my coffee setup, my journey in coffee, but it'll be a video. And I'm going to go through and do some brewing in the video and just show you the techniques, show you the different brewers, things like that. So by all means, would love to have you jump over in a couple weeks and check out the coffee video on our YouTube channel. Check out all of our videos on the YouTube channel. We'd really appreciate that. And subscribe, if you haven't, to our YouTube channel. So that's kind of, giving you the science of making coffee, getting your grind size, getting your coffee to water ratio, the water temperature, brew time, how you want to pour or cover that water, how long you want to let it sit on the coffee. All of these are small changes to any of these can make a big difference in the flavors you're going to get in your coffee. I mean, it's just can be huge. And coffee to me, it's very nuanced. I mean, it really is, just like wine and whiskey. When you start talking about flavor exploration, like we do with whiskey and coffee and wines, coffee's the same way. I mean, it's so much fun. But here's what's really cool about coffee is you're making it. I mean, obviously you're not roasting the bean, but once you have it, you're in complete control of how you're running the science project, how you're using the tools in your lab to create the different coffees that you want in your cup. It's really a lot of fun. We hear a lot of times that people will have, wine tastings with friends. They'll have, bottle shares with whiskeys. I mean, coffee shares are great. Having friends come over on a Saturday and, cook them a nice breakfast and let's do a little coffee, cupping or sharing or something, bring a fun bag of something. Coffee is just like wine and whiskey, where sharing it is a great experience, especially for people who love coffee. When you can find a bean from somewhere that you're impressed with, and you can either give a few of those beans to a friend or have them over and make them a cup, it's a great thing. So coffee is another one of those, we always say food, wine, whiskey are reasons to bring people together. And coffee absolutely falls into that category. And I just think there's a lot of parallels between coffee and whiskey and wine. I mean, there's a lot of parallels, a lot of similarities. And, I don't know why it took me so long to find specialty coffee and how to make coffee at home, make great coffee at home, but I'm glad I finally did. Coffee means, a bunch to me right now. I mean, I really love coffee. It's a part of my daily ritual, my daily routine. I really love it. And it's something like wine. We always say you're not going to taste every bottle in the world. You're never going to get through all of that. Coffee's the same way. You're not going to get to buy a bag of every coffee that's roasted. You're just not going to, but it's sure fun to try. I mean, it really is. And so I would say if you're into coffee at all, or if you're drinking something else like an energy drink or something, but you're into wine and whiskey and you enjoy that, like I just said, those explorations, the parallels are so similar. You may want to give coffee a chance. You might be surprised because I bet if you're drinking some kind of caffeinated energy drink in the morning and it's not coffee, it's probably because you've tried coffee and you've had bad coffee. So I would say give coffee another shot, but do it right. And I would say if you don't want to invest in your coffee bar setup right now, hey, go down to some specialty coffee shops, even if it's on a weekend where you're not rushing for work, and go in and really have them make you a good cup of coffee, see what it can be, and see if it's not something that might interest you, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And that could be the same approach for folks who are making coffee right now at home or stopping by and going, I don't know if I'm going to, you make it sound good, Rob. I'm not sure. I'd say do the same thing. Go by and hit them up, because I think then you're going to see that, okay, wait a second, I can really enjoy coffee. And we've already given you the tools of what you need to get started. And there's all kinds of ways to experiment, have fun, to extract different flavors from coffees. So I think you'd just be tip of the iceberg in getting started in your coffee journey. And you would absolutely love it. And like I said, $150 to get into it. It's not that much to spend when we think about the return for brewing a fantastic cup at home on a daily basis. I mean, every day, even when you travel, we talked about the travel setup, you're getting a great cup of coffee. $150 for great coffee for the rest of your life and the opportunity to share it with friends and family. I mean, that's great. All right, well, that's going to wrap up our episode. I hope you've enjoyed going over my journey in coffee, kind of what my coffee bar looks up, why I'm so excited about specialty coffee and making coffee at home. It's just something, if you're into food or you're into wine, you're into whiskey, coffee should be included in that. So just wanted to share that with you all. We're going to start doing some more coffee content on the podcast, also on the YouTube channel. So look for that. We appreciate everybody listening tonight, and you guys have a good one. We'll be back here next week for another one.